Last week, I released a short film called Photos Are Memories, and in today's video, I want to go through and break down the edit for you. So I'm going to go through everything from like pacing and how I structured the edit, all the way through like sound design, visual effects, color grading, everything. And as usual, I'm going to start off by showing you a kind of before and after breakdown of the edit. So over here, you'll see the final video. Over here, you'll see the raw footage. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see my Premiere timeline. So you can really see exactly what went into the edit. I also have a monthly membership option on my channel where you're able to download raw footage from my videos. And this month I released a bunch of raw footage from this short film. So there will be a link in the description to where you can check that out, download some of this footage, play around with it for yourself, and just see a little more of a hands-on look at what went into the short film. All that being said, let's watch through this little breakdown, and then I'll be back in a few minutes to talk you through a bit more of what went into this edit. I've heard a lot of people say that photos get in the way of memories. That when we spend so much time looking through a lens, we forget to see things with our own eyes. As someone who carries a camera absolutely everywhere, I might be a little biased, but I tend to think it's actually quite the opposite. It's always important to immerse yourself in experiences before they end, but the true power of an image is that it can serve as a gateway back to that moment, whether you're making a living or just living your life. When you look back at nostalgic photos, you feel like you're there again, and that's a feeling you just can't get any other way. When you take a photo, it makes an imprint in your mind. You remember where you were standing, what you were looking at, who you were with, and if it's a good enough photo, that imprint never fades. For the most part, this video was actually a lot less extensive in the edit than most of my projects, so I didn't stabilize as much of the footage, I didn't grade nearly as heavily as I normally do, and I didn't spend as much time on transition. There actually aren't technically any transitions in the video. That's partially because I wanted the style of this one to feel more like a movie or a commercial than a typical travel film, and it's also partially because I had to edit this entire project in like 1 week. So partially style, partially necessity, but overall just a lot less extensive than what you usually see on my channel. File organization for an edit like this is really important. When you're out filming for several days, filming all day, just shooting a ton of footage, it needs to be organized properly before you start editing, or you're just gonna completely lose your mind when you start trying to go through all this footage and turn it into something concise. For this project, and for pretty much any other shoot like this, I would organize the footage by day and by camera. That's just a good way to, before you even get into Premiere Pro, have everything separated out in a way that makes sense. The first step of the edit the moment that I got into Premiere was to make proxies of absolutely everything. We're working mostly with like 4K 10-bit footage, so it's very detailed, very large files that take a lot of your processor to play back. So the key to being able to work quickly with files like this is to make proxies of them. If proxy is a word that's new to you and it's not a part of your process, it absolutely should be. So I'll link a video right up here that'll show you how to create proxies for your footage. Once I've made all those proxies, I do selects for all of the footage. So I go through absolutely everything we shot and I cut out the good parts that are usable for the final project and I put them on a giant selects timeline. The selects timeline is another thing that I talked about in another video already, so I'll link that right up here. And on that selects timeline, I'm once again grouping all of the footage by day and by camera, so it's not like one big jumble of footage. The first thing to think about when you're tackling an edit is the overall structure of the video. What are the different sequences of it? Where do you want it to begin and end? What goes in between? Just the overall structure. And one thing that was really different about the structure for this one than what I'm used to is that it has multiple sequences going at the same time. So most of my videos, like Faces of NYC or Sounds of the PNW, they have, you know, one sequence and then another sequence and then another one, and you're only looking at one sequence at the same time, and it starts and then it ends and it doesn't come back. Whereas with this project, we have these two main sequences going back and forth for the entire video, and then this third sequence kind of sprinkled throughout the entire thing. The reason I did that is because this video is essentially an advertisement for a camera. So I wanted to show the product in a professional setting and a consumer setting. So we have this professional sequence that's me out on the trail taking photos, and then we have this more consumer sequence that's this couple out exploring the mountains and taking photos and making memories. Those two sequences alternate throughout the entire video, and then we have this third sequence showing me editing the photos I took that's kind of sprinkled throughout the entire edit. That third sequence is also the intro to the video. So we see me setting up to edit this photo, and it's a very mysterious sequence. You don't really know exactly what's going on, what I'm setting up, or what I'm about to do, and that information is slowly revealed to you throughout the rest of the video. What I would consider being the climax of the video is me eventually, after all this hiking, making it to the peak of the trail and taking the photo that I've been out to get this entire time. And at the same time, we see that couple that we saw earlier in the video setting up and taking a photo of themselves at this overlook. So that shows me taking the photo that I was editing at the beginning of the video, and then we eventually close off the video with me finishing editing that photo. So that editing sequence kind of bookends the entire edit. The music for this one was like really predictable and repetitive, so I couldn't rely on that to keep the video moving. So I had to pretty much figure out the pacing on my own. But one thing that helped to make that a little easier is that we're constantly switching back and forth between those two different sequences. There are also a lot of shorter sub-sequences throughout the entire video. So we see me filling up my water bottle from this stream. We have a sequence of me stopping to take photos in the woods. We see the couple pulling over at an overlook, frequently switching between all these different sequences so we're not just looking at one thing for the entire video, really helped to keep things moving throughout this edit. One of the biggest tips I can also recommend for pacing is to cut on motion. So throughout this video, you'll see me cutting, for example, here, right when the headlight turns to the camera, that's where we cut. Right when I pull the camera down and it passes in front of the lens, that's where we cut. There are a lot of points in this video where I cut right as I take a photo. Cutting on like a large motion or a definitive impact is a great way to kind of make sense of your pacing and decide where you should be cutting your clips and make it feel natural. And these are all things that I talked about in my pacing tutorial, which you can also watch by clicking right up here. Grading for this project was interesting because I was combining footage from the Panasonic S5 as well as footage from the Canon 1DX Mark II. So we have these two very different color profiles, dynamic range, all these different things between these two different cameras that need to eventually look the same in the final video. So color correction was crucial before even starting the grade. This is something that you should be doing regardless, but especially for a project like this where you're cutting together footage from a bunch of different cameras. So basically before I even graded, I went through and I adjusted the black point, the white point, and the white balance of every single clip, making sure that the black point was right at black, the white point was right at true white, and that the white balance was accurate. And that'll do so much for making footage from different cameras look consistent. A tool that was really useful in this one was Panasonic's Vlog to Rec 709 conversion LUT. So basically it takes that super flat log footage from that specific camera and converts it to Rec 709, which is basically just a fancy way to say normal looking footage. So a conversion LUT like that basically just gives you a good starting point to then go through and color correct and color grade your footage. As we're alternating between these two sequences, I was also alternating between a very moody color grade and a much lighter color grade. So on the darker shots of me hiking through the forest taking photos, I went for a really moody grade. So like really deep brownish reds, very moody, cooled off greens, and pretty much no blue. Pretty much just red, green, and gray. Whereas on the sequence showing the couple, it's a much lighter color grade. So there's a lot more yellow and orange in the highlights. There's a lot more of the blue kept in the images, and the green isn't quite as desaturated. Even though the grade was really moody, I still kept it a lot more subtle than I normally do. So I tried to preserve a lot more dynamic range instead of just crushing the highlights and shadows to give it a lot of punch and contrast. In addition to not grading as heavily as I normally do, I barely stabilized any of the footage in this video, which is odd because almost all of my videos I rely on warp stabilizer. I take that shaky footage, I make it nice and buttery smooth using warp. But for this one, I was shooting on a different camera that had really nice in-body image stabilization. So the image I got from the camera had like a really nice organic handheld camera motion to it. It wasn't like the digital like jitter that I'm used to getting from a mirrorless camera. Instead, it almost looked like what you would get from like a larger cinema camera. So even though the footage isn't like perfectly smooth, it's not shaky in a distracting way. It almost makes it a little more cinematic to have that organic handheld camera motion. This project was also my first time using Neat Video, and if you're not familiar with Neat Video, it's basically just a plugin that removes noise and grain from your footage and does it really, really well. I honestly feel dumb for not using this plugin like years ago. I think it cost like $75, which for a good plugin is an absolute steal. This isn't an ad or anything, I was just incredibly impressed by how well it worked. The only real effects heavy part of this video is the sunrise sequence, because if you look at the raw footage, you'll see that we didn't get much of a sunrise. It was pretty much just blue and gray. When I was planning this video, it was really important that that sequence be like a vivid sunrise, so I was kind of bummed when we didn't get one, but I was just kind of gonna roll with it and reframe the video so it would just be like a cool view. But then I tried white balancing one of the clips and I used one of the gray clouds for white balance, and it turned the entire shot like really pink, and I ended up with these really bright pink clouds. So kind of an accident, but I just went through and did that to every other shot too, and ended up with a fake sunrise that actually looked pretty good. Using the clouds to set white balance worked perfectly on the Panasonic footage, but on the 1DX footage, it didn't work quite as well. So what I had to do was basically just go through, mask out the cloudy part of the frame, and then add a bunch of pink and orange into that part of the video to simulate the same effect. So if there's any takeaway from this video, don't be afraid when you're editing to just try out random things, because you might accidentally have a really good idea. And finally, sound design. So the sound I did for this project was mostly just like Foley and ambient based on what was happening in front of the camera, but I also used it a lot for transitions. So since there are no actual like visual transitions in the video where I'm using like a mask or something, I had to rely on sound to make the shots kind of flow together. So you'll see at a lot of points in the video, I'm using this camera shutter sound as a transition. So I'll raise my camera up in one shot, and then you hear that sound, and as you hear the shutter, it transitions to the next sequence. Other than transitions though, sound design for this one was honestly pretty straightforward. Pretty much just making sure to have a really vivid atmosphere through sound. So just being very thorough with every sound I could possibly add in, whether that's birds chirping in the background or footsteps, anything and everything. Nonetheless, sound design is something I could talk about all day, but I'm not going to here because I have like 5 other videos all about sound design. So I'll link that playlist right up here. I feel like I'm promoting so many other videos of mine in this video, but I've talked about a lot of this stuff in other videos before. So if you're curious and want to see some more about any of these particular topics, top right hand corner. All that being said, that just about does it for this breakdown. I hope you found it insightful. Once again, if you want to try out some of this raw footage for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description where you can join my channel, become a member, and be able to download that footage. There are some other perks as well, but mainly being able to download that raw footage. And that's not just for this video, of course. Next month, I've got another short film coming out. I'll be releasing a bunch of footage from that one, and that'll continue in months to come. That being said, if you enjoyed this video, learned something new from it, feel free to show your support by leaving a like on the video, sharing it with your friends, or even subscribing to my channel. I upload new videos just like this every week or so, and I've also been a lot more active on Instagram lately, so feel free to follow me over there as well. I post not only all of my photography, but I've been using the Reels feature a lot to make these little like 3-way split like cinematography stories. And also I use stories a lot to show you what's going on behind the scenes of my shoots when I'm out hiking and making my videos. But that's all for now. Keep creating, and I'll see you in